Claire and Murray, you're up.
Yeah, thanks for letting us share. We're excited.
And thank you, friends and family. It's good to see y'all's faces. It was the spring of 2014, and I was sitting across from a woman named Mary Sunshine. She was a refugee from Burundi who had to flee her own husband and family. She ended up in Kigali, Rwanda. I met Mary Sunshine in the tiny room next to where her coworkers were sewing bags to be sold in the States. And I was there with my camera to do my very first film that I ever made. I sat with Mary Sunshine to interview her as she told her story of God not only providing a job, but food for her table and education for her daughter, Fawebe, who was 6 at the time and was already learning 3 languages. But God had also provided discipleship by a young missionary who had spent her first year there in Rwanda, not only teaching these women to sew, but teaching them about her God. Her name is Betsy, and she's one of my oldest childhood friends. Betsy had asked me to come to Kigali because she wondered how a video might help answer some of the many questions she was getting from folks back home in America. Questions like, why would you go all the way to Africa to teach women to sew? I'll never forget Mary Sunshine's joy and her tears while she answered my many questions. That day, Mary Sunshine professed her love for God in her own language and how God had changed her life. So I returned home. I spent many weeks editing the film and made it into a short video in time for Betsy to return that summer and to raise support for a second year in Kigali. So Betsy went around to all the same cities that she had been to the year before to raise support. She went to all the same groups of people, but this time she had a video. And that summer, Betsy raised double the support in half the amount of time.
So to remind y'all from earlier, we are Murray and Claire Rodger. We live in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We go to South Baton Rouge Presbyterian. And we got married about 1.5 years ago, December 2018. So we're technically still newlyweds. And Claire and I are filmmakers. We've been making films and taking photos for about 10 years apiece. So that gives us about 20 years combined. And but for the last 6 years, Claire has been doing this work with Mission to the World to make films for MTW. And so Claire and I, the way we met, it's kind of interesting. We met through a collaborative workspace that I had helped start back in 2016. We kind of knew each other just as acquaintances in college, but really, that's the first time we really started to get to know each other. And the first thing I noticed as Claire would show up to work each day is that she would be working on these videos from countries and places all over the world. And I was like, hold on a second. This girl has the dream job. She's a filmmaker who travels around the world and gets to film these amazing people and places. But as we started to work together and I started to ask questions about these films she was making, and Claire would ask me for some editing tips from time to time. And so we just sit down and talk about the films she was making. And that's really how I heard of MTW. I'd never heard of Mission to the World before. I'd never even stepped foot in a PCA church before. And so, but I was starting to learn about this organization through Claire's films. I was learning about their teams all over the world doing church planting work, bringing the gospel to people who had never even heard the name Jesus before. And I was just totally blown away. And so as we became friends and eventually started falling in love, and got engaged, during that engagement season, we really started talking and dreaming about what it might look like for us to start working together.
This ministry, from the very beginning, has always existed to make films around the globe that inspire and mobilize the church, the Big C church, to pray, to give, and to go be a part of God's mission in the world. And we do this because we're convinced that the gospel of Jesus Christ really is the hope of the world. So God gave Paul letters in the early church, right? In the New Testament, we see letters that Paul wrote to different churches, and it's how we hear about, the missionary journeys and these different ways of encouraging the church, of calling up the church, all of these things. God gave Paul letters. And in 2020, we have videos, we have visuals, we have audio. We get to see and hear from people like Mary Sunshine about how God has changed their lives. So to give you an example, I want to share with you guys a video that we made about our story so that you can see some of what we do abroad.
Hi. Hi. Thank you for letting me speak to you today. My name is Claire, and in America, I am a photographer. My dream is to photograph people and cultures around the world in order to show people back in America how they can be praying and supporting different people around the world doing God's work. And I will take these photos and these videos back to America and show them what you are doing to worship God with your hands and your gifts.
When I'm in the field, I often feel like I was made to do this. This is why I was put on the earth. It was soon after I first picked up a camera that I felt some kind of call to share the world through it in a hopeful way. That call developed over time and eventually led to starting this ministry with Mission to the World in 2014, in order to meet the needs for films to show what was happening in our ministries around the world. Now, more than 5 years, 15 countries, and countless photos and videos later, this calling took me to places and people I never dreamed. Murray and I got married in 2018, and he just happened to be a filmmaker. Now that Murray and I are married, we feel it's so clear what God is calling us to do this together. We both feel that this is what we were made to do. One of my favorite parts of going around the world is seeing the church abroad in different cultures and contexts. In the midst of suffering or rejoicing, I've seen the church all around the globe praising the same God. From high-rise business buildings in Japan to the poorest neighborhoods in Ethiopia. No matter their language, race, income, age, stage, war, or peace, the hope of the gospel is there. I've also seen that God's people are around the world answering a call. They're in the trenches and on the front lines to plant churches, build schools, provide medical clinics, meet refugees arriving to foreign lands, rescue women and children from slavery, feed the hungry, care for the widow and the orphan, and someone needs to tell about it. We need to hear these stories because God is on a mission in this world. The greatest thing I've learned since we started is that the gospel really is the hope of the world. And since He's working in places we can't easily get to, someone needs to go and tell about it. God has given Murray and I the camera. We will do this as a team, as a family. And we'd love for you to join us.
Since that day that I sat with Mary Sunshine, God has been continually calling me to tell these stories through film. Later that year, after my first film, we started Communications Arts Initiative with Mission to the World. For 5 years, I've gone to 3 to 6 teams a year, producing 3 to 5 short films for each team that I visit. But since we began this ministry, I've mostly gone to these teams by myself. Now, God has provided a partner, not only in life and marriage, but in ministry.
God has clearly called us together, and he's clearly calling us to work together in this ministry that he started with Claire years ago. And joining this ministry will allow us to travel together, to film together, and to edit together in a greater capacity so that we can continue the work of sharing with the American church the work that God is already doing around the world.
But we can't do this ministry alone. We need a team. We're inviting individuals and churches to partner with us in this ministry. And we're asking you to join us in 3 different ways. 1, we need prayer. We need you to pray for us as we travel the world, as we raise support, as you think of us, as we get curveballs like COVID-19. If God is not the one doing this, we will not succeed. Secondly, one of my favorite aspects of this ministry is getting to travel around the States to share these stories firsthand. We love to speak at churches and personally connect the global church to their call to be a part of the Great Commission. So if you're a pastor or an elder or on a missions committee, we'd love to connect with you and talk more about presenting at your church someday or when COVID allows us to.
Yeah, and thirdly, we also need people to send us financially. What we're looking for are yearly and monthly partners who are committed to giving for the long term. And so currently we're at 50% of our budget. So if you're interested in partnering with us and joining our sending team, we would love to connect with you. And we actually have a link that we'll put in the chat. That's a link to our website, and it'll take you to a landing page that'll have a giving link, a sign up for our newsletter, a link to some of our videos that we've done with Mission to the World, and also a higher quality version of the video you just watched.
Proverbs 25:25 says, like cold water to a weary soul, so is good news from a far country. Friends, we have good news, and we want to share it with our cameras. So please join us.
Thanks for your time.